Greetings and welcome to the Introduction to Astronomy. In this week's Misconception in Astronomy, we will talk about the element helium and find out if helium was discovered on Earth. So let's get started here. And was helium discovered on Earth? And actually, the answer is no. Helium was not discovered on Earth, but was actually discovered in the sun. And that's actually how it gets its name, helium, from Helios, for the sun. So how was it discovered? Well, Jules Janssen in August of 1868 saw spectral lines looking at the sun during an eclipse and found specifically a yellow spectral line that did not seem to line up with any element on Earth. So this was given the name helium for an element present in the sun that was found there. Now, helium was not found on Earth for more than 20 years after this, so it was not detected on Earth until the 1880s. And that gave helium this kind of unique ability that it was part of the sun, but not something here on Earth. At least that's what we thought for the first couple of decades after it was discovered. So it's here on Earth. It's always been here on Earth. Why did we not detect it on Earth? And one of the problems with helium is that it is not reactive and it doesn't form compounds with other elements. And at this point in the mid-late 1800s, the periodic table was incomplete. And we can see an example of that here, where we have an early periodic table, and you'll note that certain elements are missing from it. Primarily helium, but you'll also note that you also do not see any of the other noble gases, things like argon or neon. They're not present. They were not known at this time. There are also other gaps of elements that had not yet been detected. As an example here, we have one where there's known that there would be a place for one in this specific group, but it had not yet been detected. And you can see several other gaps in the periodic table for elements that had not been detected at this point. So at this point of time, the periodic table was incomplete. We didn't know of all the elements, so it was possible that another element could be found that here, as we did for finding an element in the sun. Now, could we find another element like this? And it's very unlikely. If we look at the modern periodic table, something like this, all of the elements are filled in. And in fact, this goes up to element 118. Now, you can go beyond that. There could be heavier elements. Most of them are extremely short-lived, very radioactive and decay in a fraction of a second. So what you could find is heavier elements, and people still look for those and try to create those through nuclear reactions. But to find any elements within the rest of the periodic table is not possible. And that's because the periodic table is organized by the number of protons in the nucleus of an atom. And you can't have a partial proton in there, so there's no way to have any other elements now in between these ones that were not known. But it is interesting to consider that the second most common element in the universe, helium, was only discovered a little over 150 years ago. So let's go ahead and finish up with our summary. And what we've looked at today is that helium was discovered in the solar spectrum during an eclipse. At this time, the element was unknown on Earth. And because the periodic table was incomplete, new elements were still being discovered at this point. So that concludes this week's Misconception in Astronomy on helium being discovered on Earth. We'll be back again next week for another Misconception in Astronomy. So until then, have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in class.